from Salt Lake.
Mhm.
But last semester I had trouble with my test getting lost somewhere in the system a couple of times. I don't know whether it was from the testing center or the professor or what it was.
I have had just rarely, but occasionally I've had tests get lost, but they've always been found.
Right. Well,
So
they were found, but
yeah,
just so you know that mine,
I'll keep a lookout for it.
yeah, mine won't come probably with the bulk of the classes, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I plan on picking them up. Let's see. I don't know this semester because Monday is actually a holiday.
Hmm.
And so since the tests close on Thursday, they won't be able to get them to me over the weekend. So it will actually be probably Tuesday before I get the opportunities to pick them up. So it's going to take me longer than it usually does. Usually I will grade them within like 48 hours of the time that I pick them up, which is, but we've got this long extra weekend, unfortunately, that I can't pick them up. So anyway, by the end of next week, you should have a grade in there. And then, Karen, I'll look for yours and message you if I don't see it. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Um, the one thing I did want to go over was those inverse matrices. Because you are not allowed to bring in notes or formulas on the test, um, even though the videos and the textbooks show you how to, like the memorization of a 2 by 2 inverse matrice, I don't actually suggest using it. Like, unless you're really good at memorizing, I suggest using the augmented matrix with the identity matrix, which I'll show you guys in just a minute too. But I just want to mention that you can't use any notes. And so if you're struggling with the memorization, there's a different way to approach an inverse matrice. So, um, and then let's see, is there anything
And
else I wanted?
for
Go
the
ahead.
exam, we are allowed to use graphing calculators, or we are not allowed to use graphing
You
calculators.
are,
Oh,
yes. So it doesn't, you can bring in your graphing calculator. Honestly, I don't know if it's going to help you a ton.
right.
Like and I'll mention this too, as I go through, I made some notes on some of the problems. Usually if it's a technology kind of question, like, hey, input this into your calculator, or I'll ask those as a project, not necessarily on the test, if that makes sense. Because I don't want to give an advantage to those that have a fancy calculator versus those that don't.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but I don't have any limits as far as bringing in a graphing calculator. I know like a 1050 class does, and calc classes might have that limitation, but we don't in this class.
I was to say
So
this is the only class I've been able to use a graphing calculator. So
right,
That's
yep,
it. Yeah, I switched over to my other calculator because of like the syllabus and stuff, and so I've been using that and practicing off of that. So that's why I was just wondering if I was going to be able to use it or not. So
yep, yeah. Good question. And then we talked about kind of the new versus the topics that you may have already covered in prior math classes. I'm just gonna scroll. As you mentioned, you just kind of want to cover those newer topics. Let's see. I'm just seeing if I've got what notes I've got here. Just remembering like profit is revenue minus cost. I think I had that at the beginning as well. That's something that you want to have memorized, right? If you're going into business, hopefully that's already kind of intuitive for you. If we say something like avoid losing money, I'm on question number 9 here. That means that obviously we want our profit, right, to be greater than or equal to 0. Um, and do you guys know how to figure out a break even? If I say
yeah.
break even point,
Equal it to 0.
yeah, so you would equal your profit equation. Oops, let's see if I can grab this. Um, your profit function equal to 0. The other way, I think I have this as another note down later. Yeah. So, like question number 24, when you guys look at the key that I didn't write the key. This was the prior 1090 instructor. And so it looks great to me. There's just a couple things that I wanted to mention that you can do differently. And so like question 24, the break even, yes, you can go ahead and hit like the profit is set that equal to zero like they did, right? So you can find your profit function and set it equal to zero. Or as an alternative, I just usually just say cost is equal to revenue, right? And you're going to get the same answer. So I'm fine if you use a different method. Um, so just know when you're looking at the key, that's not always like the only way to solve something.
Okay.
Let's see, there's a couple other, I'm gonna jump back up here, see, look at my notes to make sure that I'm covering things as you look at the key. One thing to note on like question 12 and 13. So if I give you a question like this on the test, I actually don't give you an XY axis because I think that's kind of a clue. And so you should do that yourself, right? So I'll just say graph it and I'll give you a space to graph it. And so like if you ended up, like putting anything in the negatives, this would obviously not make sense, right? Because you can't have typically like in this situation where n is time, I think in this case, right? Um, and being your x-axis, you can't have a negative amount of time, right? And so I'm just going to just check that you understand that you would need to just use that first quadrant, right? Because it specifies it here and here. That's also a good check to see if people put like n+3 in their graphing calculator, it's going to give them a whole line, right? And you have to know that you need to limit it between 0 and 12, if that makes sense. So I just want to mention that I don't give that little clue on the test. Let's see, what else did I want to mention as you're studying from this? Oh, the question number 18. I think sometimes this is the one piece that you might need to memorize, right? Is how to calculate a marginal cost. So you have to understand what marginal cost means and how to calculate it. And
I just went through
so
all that today. I was redoing some of the homework and was struggling on one piece, but yeah, I think I got it.
you got it. Okay, yep. So that marginal, basically when you see the word marginal, I like to think about it as change and then by one, right? So you're changing your production by one, and you're trying to, when it asks for the marginal cost, then you would want to know what is the cost by producing one more. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, you would want to, what the key looks great here. I personally would have shown a little more work, but you're trying to find the cost at 1001,
Mhm.
right? And then the
I
cost at making 1,000. So again, I would have just put 0.002 times by 1001 squared plus 10 times 1001, right? Just so that I was showing a little more work on the test in case I made like a calculation error. So if you had made a calculation error in your calculator and didn't get 18,014, but you had written this out for me, then I
right.
know like you just made a simple mistake. I can give you a few more, partial
Well,
points.
yeah. Because that happens to
So
me all the time. Like you'll even be thinking something and like think you wrote it, but it's and then you just write down the wrong thing. It happens all the time.
Yeah. Or
So,
you're entering it into your calculator, but you maybe forgot to clear the calculator first. So there's
yeah.
something already in there that's like plus being added. And there's just a lot of ways that you can miscalculate something like this, right? Or you
Well,
forget an extra zero. You type
yeah.
in 101 instead of 1001.
Yeah.
So just show me that, right? So I would have put, I'm going to take the cost at 1001 and then subtract the cost at 1000. And if I give you this question on the test, I will give you more space.
That's what I was gonna say. So, because it says on your thing, so there won't be scratch paper. We'll only have the whiteboard. So, but there will be plenty of space to show it all on the test.
Yes. Yeah. So what I did, when I created the test, I first created my questions and then I went back and I wrote my key on the test. And then if I ever ran out of space, I was just like, okay, and then I adjusted the spacing on the
Sure.
actual paper so that, and that kind of gives you a clue too. If I give you like this huge amount of space,
You need to
there's
leave it.
probably a little bit more math on it, right?
So, additionally, on marginal cost, so I know the equation there's the C1001 minus C1000. When's the scenario? Because I've seen it thing, I'm trying to think exactly so I can word this, but when's the scenario when you just multiply it, not you don't do the 1001 minus the 1000, you do just the equation and input the like the amount, right? So if they gave you, so they say like you want to produce, you want to know the cost of just 21. I'm sorry, I swear there was a time when I did something and it said, and the work I had to do within marginal cost, it was not using this equation. It was just plugging in whatever they had asked in the question. I should have wrote it down better, and I'm flipping through my notes trying to find where I did it, and I can't find it.
Okay, as I keep
Oh,
moving
wait.
forward, if you find it, let me know. I mean, if I'm not, because I'm thinking marginal cost, we probably would always do a subtraction because it's a
Yeah.
change, right?
I
So,
found where I did it. But I
okay,
don't have, because it was from the homework from prior, so I don't have the actual question to like remember exactly how it was worded. So yeah.
okay, let's put a little pin in that. Do you know the section and the question number?
It was section 1.3, the question number. I can see if I can find it.
Because what we can do is I can, after I've kind of looked at this review with you guys and gone through it, kind of like a big picture, I can actually pull up your question and we can go through it together. So keep looking for that
Yeah,
and
thank
we'll
you.
come back to it. How about that?
For sure.
Okay. The other kind of questions you're going to get, a lot of these are just interpreting graphs, right? So you'll have some of those interpreting of graphs. Um, oh, on the key. I did notice on question number 22, um, I probably would have marked the teacher down by like a half a point because they didn't add their units to, part B and part C. So I
Right.
definitely, when you're answering a question, all of your questions are pretty much story problems, right? So if it's a story problem, it should have a unit
Hmm.
answer with it. So they just put 0.05 for the rate of change. I probably would have put, you can still put the 0.05, but I would have put a dollar sign, or you could have changed it to even cents, right? And moved your dollar sign to cents. And again, I would have suggested they put that on C as well. So I know that sounds super picky, but we always want to answer the question the way we would with a friend. And so if they said, how much is it going to cost you? You wouldn't say 0.05, right?
Hmm.
You would say 5 cents. And typically 5 cents per minute is what you would respond. So take that extra time to put your units on your answers. Um, and then I already mentioned the break even alternative way to do it. Let's see, what else did I have here? Question 26, I probably would have solved it a little bit different just based on my preferred way to write a linear equation. So for the slope, I would have done the same thing, right? Y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, where your y's are actually, your p, which is price, and your x values are n's instead of x, right? So we're just calling it on a different variable. So I would have still got that slope of -3 over 1,000. But then I personally would have, I like my y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I just like that equation. I just have it memorized. And so I would have put, excuse me, 3 over 1,000. And then I would have picked one of my points. They also picked one of the points, right? So you could still do that. You could put p minus 15 and then n minus 7,000. And then distribute and add the 15 over. You'll get the exact same equation, just an alternative way to do it. Does that make sense?
So, okay. So you're saying, so instead of having to do the y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, you can do just the slope intercept form?
So they did, they used the slope intercept form, right?
Uh-huh. Right. So like that's why that so we I thought we were supposed to do was to do the slope intercept first and then plug that into the point slope formula.
Yeah, so the thing is, and what I'm mentioning is like you could do either one. So because they're both going to end up with the exact same answer. So it's not a do this and then do this, it's an or.
Oh, do this or do this. But you still have to do
Yes.
both.
So you don't have to do both. You
Oh.
just either put it in slope intercept form
Oh, then I need to
or put it in slope intercept form, right? This one you just have to solve for b and then throw it back in. That's what they did on the key. Or, right, on if you use point slope form, you wouldn't have to solve for b. You're not solving for b. You're just going to find b. So I'm going to take 3 1,000ths n plus, you're going to get 21,003 times the 7,000 over 1,000, which is, just 21 here. And then you'll end up adding that 15 over to the right-hand side. So you get that exact same equation.
Okay.
Just a different process in getting the end equation. So you can start with point slope form and then just solve for, your y, which is p in this case. Or you can throw it into slope intercept form, find b, and then plug it right back in, to the beginning.
Okay.
So whichever way you memorize it, or whichever is you're more comfortable with. Number 27. Excuse me. They actually, and this is again, I'm being super picky with their work here. So I would probably accept their revenue equation here, but this isn't actually an equation. An equation should have an equal sign. So your revenue equation, I would write revenue for option A, is 17,000 plus, the 7% of my sales. And it didn't say that I have to use like X, so you could even put S for sales. It doesn't matter what your variable is. I like to choose a variable that helps me remember what it stands for. So again, either of these will work. 0.03 S. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's see. And then again, you've got another question on break even. Okay, so what I mentioned kind of at the start here of our session is this question number 29, where it says, hey, plug this into your TI-83 and plot the scatter plots, and then tell me what the line of best fit is. That's not something that I intend to give to you on your exam. So
Okay.
I wouldn't stress about like understanding your calculator for that portion, because some people just use the Excel to, do those like we did on our project. So let's see. When we get into systems of equations, you've got 30 through 32, all should be super familiar to you. Question number 3, I was looking at the key and I'm like, hey, they didn't do the easiest thing possible, but it worked. But if you're looking at question number 33, your y's already have opposite
Right.
coefficients. So I'm like, why did they eliminate x? That's just where they saw it, right? So either way, you can eliminate x's first like they did, or you can eliminate y's and you'll still get that same solution. Let's see. Okay, so then objective 2 is where we start to get into the matrices. How do you guys feel about like question 37? Do you want me to go through that one with you?
So I actually haven't like done the review at all yet. I've just been focusing on the homework. So I haven't done any of this myself.
Okay.
So I'm okay with, yeah, whatever, going over any of them. I haven't struggled with any of them just yet, is what I'm saying.
Okay. How about you, Karen? I don't know. Go
If
ahead.
it's okay, if you would go over this one, that would be perfect.
Okay, great. I like to at least go over C, because I think I ended up changing the coding of one of your questions. I think this is in 2.4. I can't remember for sure, but it's not clear when you talk about like writing using a parameter like 38, right? What to do. And so I do want to go through 38, but just to preface, let's just look at 37 first. So we want to be able to interpret each row, right? And this is essentially saying on the first row that X, or if we're thinking X, Y, and Z here,
Mhm.
and this is your result, that X is equal to 2, right? X plus no Y's plus no Z's is equal to 2. And then the second row, what would you guys say you could interpret from that?
So then
Uh,
y is equal to 1, right?
Yep, just like that. Yep. So we're going to say, okay, then Y is equal to 1. And then how about that last row?
so Z is equal to 0.
And how did you get Z equals 0? Because I don't see a 0 here.
Right, because the whole row don't have anything, the entire Z column, not row.
Yeah, so I'm going to add a little like mental thought in between, because I think you're right here. But what we should think about is this is going to be, normally you see like a 1 there, right? The diagonal ones. Oops, am I wrong? Hold on. Erase that. So this is saying that it's 0 Z's, right? 0 Z's is equal to -4. It's also saying 0 X's and 0 Y's, but we're focused on normally when we look at RREF, the reduced row echelon form, that we're looking for our last number in that bottom right-hand corner. So this is saying 0 Z's equals 4. So yes, Z could be 0, Wait a minute. Could 0 times 0 equal -4?
No.
Hmm. Right? Because 0 times by 0 does not equal -4.
Zero.
So, could I throw in a different number for z? So think about 0 times what number is going to equal a -4?
Well, 1.
Well, what's 0 times 1?
0 times anything is 0, though.
You're right.
Yeah.
Wait, I
So
thought you
what
said times 4,
could I times it by 4?
not
What's
0 by
0
4.
times -4?
Still 0.
Still 0. I shouldn't put my check mark there. I'm just saying it's going to be equal to 0, right? So 0 times 8 is equal to 0. Can I put anything in for z that will end up, if I multiply it by 0, will end up with a result of -4?
No.
Mm-mm. The other thing you can look at, if you remember your rules from algebra, if I wanted to isolate that z, I might think about dividing by 0, right?
Right, but you can't.
But this is a big old nope, right?
Mhm.
So in other words, z is undefined,
Oh, okay.
right? It's not possible to have
Oh, yeah, it would
a
be.
number for z, multiply it by 0, and ever end up with a -4.
Okay, so it is still 0, but because we know when you try to solve it that it becomes an undefined, that's how we know it's undefined.
So I want to clarify, it's not that z can be 0,
Okay,
because 0 times 0 does not give you -4.
right,
There is absolutely no number that you can multiply 0 and end up with a -4,
right. So that's why
right?
so it just is just undefined.
It's just
Just
undefined.
is
Yep.
undefined. Okay.
So then we go like, wait a minute, what does that mean? Do I have one solution, lots of solutions, or no solution?
Oh, one is undefined. I'm not sure. One
Well,
solution?
let's pause on that for a minute and let's look at the other ones then, right? And see what we think. Okay. So let's look at B. Maybe we can do this by,
Okay.
process of elimination. So what do we know about B? What's it telling us?
So it says that X is
2.
2,
2.
right?
Yep. And the second row?
2.
Well, it's telling us x is -1, but how are they getting -1?
Or Y is
So,
-1.
so yeah, Y is -1.
Well,
They're
that's what I
just
meant then.
defining it. They've already done all of the work,
Okay.
right? To put it in reduced row echelon form. And then what is it telling you on that last row?
The z is equal to 3.
Z is
Mhm.
equal to 3, right?
Okay.
So how would you interpret that? Would it be one solution, infinite solutions, or no solution?
Oh. Um, well,
By the way, you could write this as like your ordered triple, right? It's kind of like an ordered pair, but with an X, Y, and Z instead of just X and Y, right? So that means that I have these three equations that, if we think about like a three-dimensional, three equations in 3 dimensions, they cross at a single point,
1, 2.
right? So this is what we call one solution. I have one possibility for X, one possibility for Y, one possibility for Z. Okay. Does that make sense with the one solution?
Okay. So, yes.
Okay. So now let's take a look at C. What does C, that first row, tell you?
So X. Oh. So does it mean so X is 2 and
we have this little like
Right.
thing that's
I'm trying
not
to
quite what
go.
we want. So it says x plus, how would I interpret that 3? What's the 3 associated
I guess that
with
would
what
be
variable?
3z.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it's saying x plus 3z is equal to
Oh, here we go.
2, right?
Okay.
And what about the second row?
So it's just y plus z equals 5.
Yeah. So I don't quite have x by itself and I don't quite have y by itself. What about the last row?
Well, it can be 0 because 0 times 0 is 0.
Yeah, it could be 0, but I want to interpret this as typically we want to write it in terms of that bottom
Mhm.
right hand part of our matrix, right? So I'm going to put 0 times z equals 0, right?
0, so yeah. Okay.
So yes, z could be 0 because 0 times 0 equals 0. Could z be 5?
CP5. It could
Does 0 times
because
5
0,
equal 0?
yes.
Hmm, that worked too. Could z be negative 15.8?
Yes.
Yes, because I'm going to multiply it by 0 and that will give me 0, right? And so what
Okay.
do I know about z?
But it has infinite solutions.
Yeah, so z can be any number, right? And
Okay.
so, yes, I'm going to interpret this as like lots of numbers, right?
Mhm.
Or infinite.
And so that means the entire solution's infinite?
Yep. And
Okay.
that means that we end up
Oh,
interpreting, y and z in terms of, because I have to know what z is, because there's all these options for it, right? So x and z are going to be interpreted based on what z is. There's not just going to be one solution. Okay, and I'll explain that a little bit more when we get to 38,
So
right?
then that makes A no solution, right?
right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And think about that. Like Z can't exist. That's what I'm saying by undefined, right? So if Z can't exist, then none of the solutions can exist.
Mm.
Undefined means not possible.
Okay.
Anything else that you guys want me to clarify on those types?
Um, no, but I'm nothing I can think of that I want you to clarify, but that was really good. That helped a lot.
Good, good. So we're going to use that information, particularly C, to do number 38.
Okay.
Okay. Because we can see here on number 38 that this bottom row is the same as C above, right? Where I
Right.
have all zeros.
Right.
So if we reduced our matrix and it ended up reducing with, and all the bottom row ended up eliminating, and I got zeros there. What do you know?
Infinite.
Yep. So Z is basically any number, right?
Uh-huh.
So what we want to do on this one is we call Z any number. This is kind of what we're calling a parameter, is we're going to define Z as itself. And I want to mention here that a lot of times, like your homework said, use the parameter T. Okay.
Uh-huh.
One of the questions didn't actually tell you what to define the parameter as. And so, but then the answer had T's in it, and you're like, where did this T come from? So in a lot of math classes, they use the parameter of T. In this case, on our review, they just said, just define Z as Z. Okay. And then what we would do is say, what's this row? Let's go back and interpret this one. What does that mean?
So y plus 2z equals 4.
Yep. And then what's the first one? The first row?
X plus 2z equals 2.
Yeah. And those three equations are what it's asking for. So if we look over here, oh, they wanted to solve. I should have done that. So we're going to take these three equations and let's just solve for X and Y. That makes sense. And Z is going to be Z. So what is X? If I said solve for X, you would say it's
X equals negative 2z plus 2.
yeah, or you could even put 2 minus 2Z. That's fine. I wouldn't mark that wrong. And then Y is,
Z, y would be same, so 4 minus 2z.
yep. So you could either write it that way or that way, and you can write Y as 4 minus 2Z, or you can write Y as negative 2Z plus 4, and then Z equals Z. So we just want to define what X, Y, and Z is in terms of Z. That's what it means by using the parameter, which is basically in terms of
T. Okay. So so the difference between this one and the last one, because the last one we got the infinite solutions, and this one was just in the way the question was asked. This one was asking in terms of parameters, so that's where we knew to do this instead.
yes, exactly. Yeah, because this one we would just, they weren't saying like, give it in
Okay, yep.
definitions of, a parameter. We would have just said there's infinite solutions.
Okay, got it.
So
Okay.
also, like if you are going back and reviewing your homework questions, like I said, they might say put it in terms of T,
Mm-hmm.
and then you would just say Z is T,
Sure, right.
right?
Okay.
And then you'd say Y would be 4 minus 2 T's, and then X would be 2 minus 2 T's. So they're just telling you what to write for that number that is any number. Okay. They're just telling you what variable to use. So that could be a little bit confusing, that parameter word, which just think about it in terms of.
Okay.
I do want to go through, let's go ahead and do number 39 as well. And then I'll show you some of these other ones manually. I know I wanted to get to like 45 by hand. So let's do 39, and then I'm going to jump to number 45. So hopefully writing the augmented matrix is not too difficult. We just write, this is just basically going backwards from where we were, right? So we write the coefficients of each equation and then augment it with the solution. And so then we've got 3 and then negative 4 and 8. So we have kind of this vertical line for our equal sign. So that's as simple as A is. When we get to B, there's lots of different ways that we can put this in reduced row echelon form.
Okay.
So it just depends on where you want to go with it first, because we can swap rows, we can add rows, we can multiply rows and multiply and add. So generally what I like to do is I like to make this somehow like a 0, right? So that's usually my first goal is try to get a 0 and then at the bottom and then work my way up. Or I can put a 0, if I had like a 3 by 3 or something. So I just start with my zeros. So how can I make that bottom left hand coefficient a 0? This might take a little bit of math here.
Hmm. So this is where, and maybe Karen might be a lot better at this than me. So this is where we need to do the like row one or minus row two. And right? Is that like how any
Yeah, you can take like row 1 minus row 2. Now, if I do that, like row 1 minus row 2,
You're going to end up with -4.
see,
we
so
would end up with like 2 minus 3, which would be a -1, right?
that's where I'm really struggling is actually knowing how to interpret what that looks like. What I'm supposed
Okay,
to, yeah. So that's
so
where I'm
let me
really
see if I can tie this back to, we kind of briefly looked at um, the elimination method, right? So go back to like number 33, because it's almost the same problem. We're just using matrices, right?
okay.
Instead of using elimination. And I said, I want to get rid of my y's. And if I just
Right.
added those 2 rows, then it would get
Oh.
rid of the y's, right?
Uh-huh.
But the key over here said, let's get rid of those x's, right? So if we wanted to get rid of the x's, we needed to multiply this first equation by 3 and
Mhm.
then add them, right?
Right.
That is essentially what we want to do with our matrix.
Okay.
Because I basically, when I put a 0 here, that
Uh-huh.
means I want to eliminate my x's
Okay.
because this is in my x column, right?
Right.
And so if I said I had, let's go back to kind of what we know from like 1010. If I said eliminate my x's,
Hmm.
what would you do?
For this one, I would do so I put like a so I put -3 up top and put a 2 at the bottom times everything by everything, right? And
Yep.
then add that together. So, okay.
That's what you want to do here then.
Okay, I don't know why I didn't that did not click. I didn't realize that's literally all we were doing was just that. Like I've been looking at this
Yeah,
almost
it's just
for
your
the
elimination method written weird.
okay.
So,
Okay.
so you're going to take -3 times row 1, right? And you're
Yes.
going to add 2
Okay.
times row 2. And that's a lot. So I might even just say, okay, let me just write above and below, right? So -3 times row 1, think about it up here, right? So that would be -6x, right? If I'm distributing that -3. And then I'd have +12, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then -3 times 4 is -12. And I'm just going to change my color here. I'm going to do a 2 here in red. And if I took 2 times row 1, what am I going to get? I mean, row 2, excuse me.
2 times row 2, so you're gonna get 6,
And then,
-8,
mhm,
and 16.
and
Oh my
16.
gosh.
And then add those two together. And we're going to put that in this bottom
Oh,
row. Okay, so if I take that -6 plus 6, I get the 0
0.
I want.
Uh-huh.
And then
Oh, okay.
for
In the goal 0, the goal 0 is the one you're
the
saying.
goal, yep,
Okay.
right? -6
Right, right,
plus
right.
6 is 0. And then what's the next number on the second row,
12 plus -8,
which is
4, and
4.
that goes there. Okay.
Mhm.
And then just do the -12 plus the 16.
Yep, which is,
4. And that goes over there. Okay.
yep, oh, somehow,
Okay.
okay. Okay. Now, this first one, we can either keep it exactly the same, but if I told you that I had two coefficients of 2, -4, and 4, what like jumps out to you?
And for the 2 for greatest common factor.
Yeah, greatest common factor, like they're each divisible by 2, right?
Right.
So if I want, I'm probably doing too many steps at once here, but it'll work. If I want this to be a 1, what would I do with this row?
With which row? With the first row?
The first row, yes.
If we want it to be 1.
I want to change
Oh, you got
this
to
to
divide it.
1. Yeah, you could divide everything by 2 on that first equation, right? And it would simplify it by quite a bit. It would change this to a 1. So that's what I'm going to do here. Now, in typically what we would do is we would say that I'm taking half of row 1, right?
Mhm.
Or you could say row 1 divided by 2. Typically in matrices, they like to use multiplication. I think the key might even put 0.05 times row 1. I like the half there, but basically you're dividing everything in half. So what would the -4 become?
-2.
-2. And then 4 becomes
Just 2.
just 2. Yep.
Okay.
And now we're like halfway there already.
That made I don't know what it was, just seeing the like literally just seeing like -3 R1 plus R2 and all that and hearing and seeing it, I could not figure out what I was doing, and that just made that so much better.
You're not alone. And I think I wish more videos connected it to the elimination method because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
most students are like, I got the elimination method. And I'm like, you're doing the same thing.
Because literally as soon as you said that, I was like, no, I know the elimination, like I know how to do that, but okay, perfect.
That's what you're doing.
Oh, thank
So
you.
yeah, let's look at this bottom row again. What do we want to do with that bottom row to put it in reduced row echelon form? Remember, we want ones along the column, right? And we want zeros below the column. So in order to get row echelon form. So what do I want to do?
Okay, so we still want to get, so hold on. So we need to turn, so we're going to change that 4 to our goal, and we're going to make that goal 1.
Yep.
Sorry,
So
the
this
4
is
on the
our new
bottom.
goal,
Yeah,
right?
okay. Yeah.
So
Okay,
how do I make that 4 be a 1?
cool. Oh shoot. You make 4 1. You
Divide it by 4.
take
Yeah.
4.
Yeah, you can still
Yeah.
like in your head see this bottom row as 4y equals 4, right?
Okay.
So what would you do
4. Oh yeah,
to
divide by 4.
solve that? You would just divide by 4. So what you're doing is taking row 2
That's 1. Yep.
and dividing it by 4. I'm fine if you write it that way. Again, a lot of people like to use like a decimal or a fraction, which basically means you're timesing by a quarter or, 0.25.
Sure.
And so what would you get for the augmented side?
Um, 1 as well.
The 1, right? So bingo, I met my goal. And let's go ahead and just rewrite row 1.
1, -2, and 2. Okay, now I'm seeing why it takes so many things to get through it all. I see it now.
Yeah, it's all and again, like you could have done this differently. I'd gone a different process. I believe, let's see if I've got the site over here. Um, yeah, they started by making this first one a 1, right? By timesing everything by a half. We eventually did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just, once that was a 1, then they needed these to be opposite, right? So they're looking at, they wanted to create a 0 here. So that means that this needs to be a -3, hence why they times row 1 by -3. And then they added those 2 rows to create this row, right?
Right. Okay.
So they just did it in a different process,
Sure.
and that's fine. Um, it did say put in REF or RREF. So right now it's in REF because I've got this goal made, right?
Or the two
One's
one.
along the columns and zeros below and to the left, right? If I asked you guys to go one more step, because I think on the test I require you to put it in RREF, would be your next step.
So the next one would be working on the -2.
I don't know what just happened there. Hold on. Yeah, we want to work on the -2. So we've got the 0, 1, 1, goal met on the bottom, even for RREF, right? But then I want to focus on how do I make second position of row 1 a 0. Any thoughts?
So because what you do to one, you have to do to the whole row,
To the whole
right?
row. Yep.
Oh.
So usually when you think about if I need to get a 0, I want to create opposite coefficients, right?
Okay.
And add rows together. And I would say if you need a 1, we usually multiply the row or often divide by, a whole number, or we can either
Mhm.
multiply by a fraction or divide, right? So if we need a 1, we do something to the whole row. If we need a 0, we usually have to eliminate, right? So what we want to do if I need a 0 up here is I need this to be a 2 so that I can add those and get the 0.
Wait, sorry. You need what to be a 2? Sorry.
I need this position, right, to be a 2 in order to add -2 and 2 and get a 0. So you've got a -2 to begin with, right? And my goal is basically to get a 0.
Right.
And so I forgot to add my word
So,
add.
so you're saying the one that we just turned, sorry, the one that, yeah, the one that we just got our goal to a 1, we now need to turn that to a 2?
Um, so we need to change it to a 2 middle step to add it to make, so I basically need to add something here to make it, this is really my goal, right? Is the
Right.
0.
Right.
So I need to have a 2 in my middle step in order to take that -2 and add something to it and get a 0.
Okay.
So basically what I want to do is I want to take this row 2 and I'm going to multiply it by 2 so that this is the opposite of the number above it. And I'm going to add it to the original row 1. So basically, if I double this row, I'm going to get 0, 2, and 2, right?
Okay. Uh-huh.
And so I'm looking at kind of this 0, 2, and 2, and I'm going to add it to the top row. So 0 plus 1 is
1.
1.
1. Yep. And if I took that 2 and -1, I get 0.
-1. 2 and negative. 2 and -1.
-2 for the top row, +2 for row 2,
Oh, yes, 0.
right? And that's 0, so goal met. And then I'm going to take 2 in my augmented side, +2, which is
4.
4. Yep. So I'm taking 2 plus the 2 times row 2, and that's going to give me 4.
And 2. So 2 times 2 plus row 1. So the 2 times row 2 plus row 1, is that still another matrix that we should be drawing, or an augmented matrix we should be drawing, or no?
Nope. Nope. So you don't actually, I just wrote those numbers to help me keep track of them,
Uh-huh.
right? But I'm just taking 2 times row 2. I just keep that in my head or like literally write it, kind of just super small. So it's not actually going to be in our new matrix, right? And then we add it to the row above.
Holy. Oh, I was getting it.
Let me also see if this is helpful because let's interpret when I get to the REF, right, form,
Uh-huh.
what does this bottom row mean?
It means that y equals 1. Yeah.
Right? Yep. And what does the top row mean?
X minus 2y equals 2.
Equals 2. Yep. And so you got to REF, you're almost done. If I had given you these two equations, what would you do? Like without like matrices.
Solve for y?
Y is solved
Yep.
for.
Oh, on the top one, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So I would replace the y with 1, right?
Okay.
Substituting y, and we'd get x minus 2 equals 2, right? And then
Right.
would add the 2 over, and what would I end up getting?
Oh,
4. Boom.
okay. Okay, but that always works, so I can always do the elimination method up until the REF, and then knowing I need to get to 1, 0, 0, 1, whatever. But
One's along the diagonal, zeros
right,
on all the other
right,
locations. Yep.
right, and then just go through, interpret the REF, and then solve. I can just do that.
But I do want to, the goal is to get you to get to this, like, okay, what
Okay,
do I need to do? Right? So think
right.
about what my hints over here are. Let's see.
You create op. Yeah, I took a
If
photo.
you ever need a 0, create opposite coefficients and then add your rows. So you're like, I need a 0 here. In
Hmm.
order to get a 0, I need to make the opposite row the opposite number. So I need this to be a 2, right?
Right.
So therefore, I have to times the whole row
Mm-hmm.
by 2. And then I'm going to add it.
Okay.
Again, those just take lots of practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of practice. Yeah. I think we're going to go through, let's go through one more of those.
So, like,
That idea, but I'm going to apply it to finding an inverse matrix. So as I mentioned, like on the beginning of the video, you could memorize the formula for finding the inverse of a 2 by 2 matrix. Please don't try to find the inverse of a 3 by 3 matrix by memorizing it. That is just, it's a big formula. And if I give you a 3 by 3, it'll be super easy to convert. And by super easy, sorry, super easy to me. Like you won't end up with a bunch of fractions. But instead of if you look at the key, like on 45, they have this, oh, just use the dang formula. And that
Yeah.
that can work. If you memorized it, it will work. Okay. But if you are not good at memorizing it, I don't suggest trying, right? So the way that I suggest finding your inverse matrix is by augmenting it with your identity matrix and then getting the identity matrix through row operations, which we just kind of started working on, right? Getting the identity matrix on the left-hand side, and then you'll have, if you, as soon as you get the identity matrix on the left, you'll have the inverse matrix on the right. Okay, so I think this is more familiar than memorizing. So I'm going to step through this with you. I don't know where that 3 came from. Let's see if I can delete that. Okay, so we're going to take this, define this matrix as A. I'm just going to write it down here. And I'm going to augment it with the identity matrix. And the identity matrix is ones along the diagonal, zeros everywhere else. And what I want to do is end up with a 1 up here, a 1 down here, a 0, and a 0. So this is going to just go through, we're going to go through kind of the same process that I just went through in trying to get zeros and ones. Okay. And again, lots of different directions you can go here. What pops out to me is if I added row 1 and row 2, I'm going to end up with a 1 for an x coefficient, right? And I kind of want a 1 somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and just add those 2 rows. And where would you guys rather have a 1 for the x in row 1 or row 2? Based on that we want the identity matrix.
In row 1.
In row 1, yeah. So I'm going to take row 1 and row 2. I'm just going to and add them together and put the result up on row 1. So if I added -4 and 5, I get 1. And if I add 3 and
Negative.
-4, I get -1, right? Just adding those as they are. And what's, I still have to add the augmented part. What's 1 plus 0?
1.
1.
Yeah.
And then 0 plus 1 is 1.
Okay. So
Right? So if I add row 1 and row 2 and replace the first row with that result, that's going to be row 1 now. There's a bunch of 1s and a -1 in there. Which of these do you guys want to keep? Row 1 or row 2? We can, because you can switch them. It doesn't matter. I put this in between, so let me write it there instead. Do you guys want a -4 for the, or a 5 for the bottom row?
5 for the bottom row.
Sure. So let's keep the bottom row the same. Okay.
So 1.
Okay. So I've got a 1. So 1 out of my 4 positions is correct. Let's aim for, so I'm going to keep that a 1. I'm going to keep that first row all the same because it's my easy row. What if I wanted to put a 0 down here like I did in my prior example? What would I need to do to create a 0 for my x coefficient?
Oh, wait.
Here's my goal.
Right. Hold on. And we just did it. We just did it.
We just did it. How do I create a zero? Let me go back up.
Back
What
door
were the
open.
notes?
Back door closed.
Oh my gosh. Create opposite. I took a photo. I didn't write it in my notes. Create opposite at and then add the coefficient rows. Okay.
Yep. Create opposite coefficients and add the rows, right?
Oh, goodness. Okay.
So back to this one.
Rows.
Oh, where did I go? Okay. So how do I create opposite coefficients? I've already got a 5 there that I want to replace. So look at the opposite row and what do I want this one to become?
-5.
Yep.
Right.
So
So
what am I going to do to make a 1 be a -5?
times the whole thing by -5.
I'm going to take -5 times row 1
Yeah.
and I'm going to
Oh,
add
no.
it to row 2.
Row 1 and add to row 2. Okay, so then -5 times 1, -1, 1, and 1. Okay.
So if I take -5 times everything in row 1, we can kind of just write it at the top. What would be -5 times -1?
Is -5 times -1 is 5.
5 times 1,
5.
negative, right?
5.
And then this one's also
And
going to be a
-5 times 1,
negative
yes, and then
5.
-5 as well,
Yep.
yeah. -5,
So you've got, I have a little dash there
-5,
accidentally that I want to
5,
remove.
-5, -5. Okay.
Okay,
Let's
so you've
do
got
5.
-5 plus 5. When I add those two rows, like my imaginary kind of orange row at the top plus the green row, that's going to give me 0, my goal. And what's going to be in the second position of row 2?
So it's the 5 plus -4. So 1.
1. Yep. And
-5
on the augmented side, what do I get?
would just be -5
Mm-hmm.
and -5. Okay.
-5 plus 1.
What? -5 plus 1.
Yep, because we have a
Wait.
1 there.
Oh, we do.
It'd be
Yeah.
-4 or
Yep, you got it. -4.
Yeah. Okay. Whoops. -4. Okay. 1, -1, -1, -5, -3. Okay.
Okay. So we're almost, let's see, what's our goal? Have I met my goal?
To have augmented and no.
What do I need? I need to create the identity on this left-hand side, right?
Right.
So my 1's good, my 0's good, my 1
Okay. -1.
at the bottom is good. What do I need?
Gotta get rid of that -1.
Yeah, so I need a 0 up here, right?
Okay.
So my bottom row is actually perfect.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I need to create a 0, right, for the second position of row 1.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I do that?
Create opposite coefficients and add them together.
Yep. So I have a -1. What's the opposite of -1?
1.
1.
Oh, look at that.
Okay.
They are opposite. So all I need to do is take row 2 and add it to row 1, right?
Shoot, yep. R1. Okay.
So what's 0 plus 1? If I add my x values,
There's 1.
1. Let's verify I get a 0 here. If I take -1 and 1, I get
And 1 plus 1. 0.
0.
Back.
And 1 and -5?
1 negative. Whoops. -4. Duh.
-4. And -4 and 1?
-3.
-3.
Okay.
So I now have my identity sitting on the left. So what is on my right?
Okay, so that's
Inverse.
a -1. Okay.
So your inverse matrix is -4, -3 for row 1, -5, -4 for row 2.
Ah,
Now, you might argue that was harder than memorizing something, but I mean, we've already memorized the process, right? When I'm needing to write things in reduced row echelon form anyway. So for me, it's easier, right? Because it's the same process I've already had to memorize.
right. Mhm.
Any questions on that one?
No, I'm going to be practicing those though.
And then 46. So if I give you this on the test, here's a little clue. Um, I usually on 46, what I do is this number, if I give you like these two, this matrix will match this one, just as a hint. Okay. And the reason why is because you've already done the work to find the inverse matrix. So let's just quickly review what we're doing here with AX equals B. So if this was just not matrices, but these were just variables, you would divide both sides by A, right, in order to isolate X. But because these are matrices, what we're doing is we take the inverse matrice and we multiply it. And you have to make sure that you're multiplying it on the left-hand side so that these reduce. An inverse multiplied by a regular matrix is the identity matrix, leaving just X. So X is going to be equal to the inverse matrix multiplied by B. Okay. So that's what we're going to use to when it says solve the matrix equation is our first step is going to be find the inverse function, okay? And then your second step is going to be this multiply your inverse function by your B matrix. Okay, so I know this is going to be a little bit different than the key, but just for the sake of time, let's just say that those two A's matched up, right? So this had like a -4, 3, and then this row was a 5 and a -4, right? So it was the same as the A matrix above.
Okay.
Then we would go through like yada, 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 the same steps. And then I would take the inverse that I just found, right? So you would take the inverse and then you would multiply that by matrix B, which is a 2 by 1, right? And if I multiply those two together, what size matrix are you going to get? What dimensions?
A 2 by 2 times a 2 by 1. We'll get a 2 by 1.
Yep. So you're going to end up with 2 rows and 1 column, right? So a 2 by 1. And so do you guys remember how to multiply the matrices, or do you want me to quickly go over that as well?
Well, let's see. Um, yeah, let's go over because I think I'm relying heavily on my calculator for that. And I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you were showing work on this, what we do is we take the X value in the first position, -4, and then we multiply it by the 2, right?
Okay.
And then we add the
Oh,
second
for -3 times. Yep, I do remember.
times by 1, right? And then for row 2, we just take row 2 and we multiply it by the column of B. So we'd take -5 times by 2
Mhm.
plus -4 times by 1, right? And again, it's helpful if you write that all down so that I know
Yeah.
what, that you know how to do it. So this would be -8 minus 3. I'm just doing this in multiple steps, but you can use your calculator to do the calculation. And this is -10 minus 4. So we get the answer would be, X, or our solution is -11,
Yep.
-14.
Great. Yep, no, I do remember that.
Good. Good. How does that all feel? Little overwhelming?
Yeah, yeah. That's a lot.
Lots.
The
It's a
REF,
lot to remember. Yeah.
yeah, that's the biggest stuff. It's the REF and the RF, I think.
Yep, those are the ones you want to practice. And then again, like I prefer that finding the inverse by doing row operations, with the augmented identity. Um, let's see, a couple other things. Like if I give you questions like 44, 42 through 44, you can feel free to like just write the matrix, the two matrices and the result. That's okay. And then I've even got like you guys both have a TI 84,
Plus,
I have an 83.
83. Yeah, and they have the same buttons, the 83 and the 84, as far as I think the matrix. Did you guys figure out how to use those?
yeah, well, I did, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you don't, I mean, you could always do it by hand, right? But if it's a story problem like this, I'm usually fine, especially with all those decimals, if you just calculate it using your calculator. It's the ones like 45 and 46 that I will, and even the RREF, that I will specify that I need to see that you know how to do the row operations for. So story problems, just write what matrices you're putting in your calculator, and then you can go ahead and get the results of the multiplication or the addition, whatever operation you're doing.
That door closed.
Okay.
Anything else? Did you want me to go back to that question in 1-3?
No. So that one I'm not, because I feel like I worked through that. I
Okay.
think where now the biggest, like my biggest question would be where you had talked about us only needing to use either, and that was a part of 1.4 actually, only needing to use either point inner slope, or because everything I've done and what I'm looking at, and from what I remember from the videos, he had us use both, and I thought I had to use both to get the answer. So,
Oh,
but that's why
no,
I'm
and
like,
I haven't watched the video. Now I'm gonna go back and see like if there's something that I maybe need to clarify on that page, because yeah, usually you just choose one or the other. So maybe he was just, making sure that you understood that you could do either.
yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna I'll probably practice like one or two more times, just make sure I feel comfortable with it moving to the test, and then yeah. So
Okay. Okay. Yep. Anything else for you, Karen?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, well, best of luck. It sounds like you guys are gonna work hard studying, and so you should do well on your test. So, if you guys don't mind, I'm gonna stop the recording, and if you're okay with it, I would like to share it with the class if they wanted to watch it.
That's fine.
Right. Well, if you guys have more questions, feel free to ask them on the discussion boards too. I try to watch that carefully. I know you guys have sent me maybe some individual emails too. I'm happy to answer those as well. So
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
thank
Thanks for your
you. Thanks
time.
for attending. It's always nice when a few people show up. So
All
Yeah,
right.
I
I
appreciate you
hope you
doing
found
it
it helpful.
very
Thank
much.
Thanks,
you.
guys. Good
Thanks.
night.
All right. Night.
Bye.